Okay. So I am going to be also one of the cohort joining all you guys, my first women's leadership study tour. And I guess I am a bit of a nerd. I am very much into learning and development and the future of learning. And so when I looked at the study tour outline, I thought, oh, I really want to make the most of this. So I'm going to develop a learning design. And it's something that I do for myself when I'm looking to go into a deep learning experience. And I thought, oh, maybe this is something other people would be interested in. And so that's kind of why we're here. I reached out to Tanya and she's like, yeah, let's do it. So this is just, I guess, a on the go kind of gift that I'm hoping you guys will all enjoy. And I thought today would be good for those who want to understand a bit more about the learning design I've put together. I can go through it a bit and give you a chance to kind of think about it, ask questions, and then obviously we'll get to meet each other when we're on the tour. So a few more people have just joined. There's Kenya. I think she's dialing in from Israel or somewhere far away.
Hi everyone, can't wait to meet you all. I'm so excited.
I know. So really maybe we should go around and do some really brief introductions. You might be a bit hard without the order. How about we just turn everyone unmute. And let's just say hi to each other and just wave and say hi and nice to meet you.
Hi.
Nice
to meet you. Nice to meet you.
So I know it'll be so much nicer when we get to meet in person and we've got a chance to have those lovely conversations over the 6 days. But what I'm going to take you through today is really an overview of the learning design. And I want this to be interactive and to answer questions and to chat about stuff. So don't feel like we need to, be formal or anything like that. So if you've got the chat box open, feel free to put in any questions on the chat box. I'll be looking at the chat box in case there's multiple questions. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so one of the things that I'm really passionate about with learning is how do you hack your own learning? And I always like to start with this quote that I'm sure you guys have seen before. It's from Alvin Toffler, who was a writer, futurist, and philosopher, American. And he basically talked about how the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can't read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And just with how much change is happening and is, predicted to keep increasing the level of change, I think this idea of how do we unlearn and relearn is really important because there's so much knowledge that exists, but people don't share the same knowledge. And so we've got this constant, I guess, challenge or different perspectives, but the opportunity is how do we use that to get to a better place? And that's going to require a lot of unlearning and relearning. And one of the things that got me really excited about the study tour was the fact that it was about unlearning and relearning, so how do we immerse ourselves? We've got a most amazing agenda, but how do we use that to challenge our perspectives and actually figure out what's a better way forward? So does anyone have any thoughts on that? I'll just stop for a sec and see if anyone has any thoughts. You can pop it in the chat box or you can just go off mute, whatever you prefer.
I'll jump in. I think just in reflecting or anticipating, I guess, the study tour, I've been saying to people that I'm surrounded by, I'm really ready to get uncomfortable because I know I'm going to have to get uncomfortable to squeeze the marrow out of this experience. And I think that's kind of wrapped up in that quote, really. The essence of that idea and that feeling and that anticipation is like, get ready to get uncomfortable. And yeah, so I find it a really exciting prospect.
I love that. Yeah, that level of uncomfort.
Yeah, I think we all have to have a bit of courage, right, to step out of our comfort zone as we learn. Otherwise, we're not actually learning. If we're sort of doing within our comfort zone, we're actually not learning.
Yeah, we're repeating a lot of the time. We're just reinforcing or repeating rather than learning something different or something new. Yeah, great. Well, I've got a little interesting video to play you guys, which I think brings this to life. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a great way to illustrate unlearning and relearning.
Hey, it's me, Destin. Welcome back to Smarter Every Day. You've heard people say it's just like riding a bike, meaning it's really easy and you can't forget how to do it, right? But I did something. That damaged my mind. It happened on the streets of Amsterdam, and I got really scared, honestly. I can't ride a bike like you can anymore. Before I show you the video of what happened, I need to tell you the backstory. Like many 6-year-olds with a MacGyver mullet, I learned how to ride a bike when I was really young. I had learned a life skill and I was really proud of it. Everything changed though when my friend Barney called me 25 years later. Where I work, the welders are geniuses and they like to play jokes on the engineers. He had a challenge for me. He had built a special bicycle and he wanted me to try to ride it. He had only changed one thing. When you turn the handlebar to the left, the wheel goes to the right. When you turn it to the right, the wheel goes to the left. I thought this would be easy, so I hopped on the bike, ready to demonstrate how quickly I could conquer this.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Destin Salmon. First attempt riding the bicycle. All right. So the faster I go, the better. Yeah,
I couldn't do it. You can see that I'm laughing, but I'm actually really frustrated. In this moment, I had a really deep revelation. My thinking was in a rut. This bike revealed a very deep truth to me. I had the knowledge of how to operate the bike, but I did not have the understanding. Therefore, knowledge is not understanding. Look, I know what you're probably thinking. Destin's probably just an uncoordinated engineer and can't do it. But that's not the case at all. The algorithm that's associated with riding a bike in your brain is just that complicated. Think about it. Downwards force on the pedals, leaning your whole body, pulling and pushing the handlebars, gyroscopic precession in the wheels. Every single force is part of this algorithm. And if you change any one part, it affects the entire control system. I do not make definitive statements that often, but I'm telling you right now, you cannot ride this bicycle. You might think you can, but you can't. I know this because I'm often asked to speak at universities and conferences, and I take the bike with me. It's always the same. People think they're going to try some trick or they're just going to power through it. It doesn't work. Your brain cannot handle this. For instance, this guy, I offered him $200 just to ride this bike 10 feet across the stage. Everybody thought he could do it.
No, you didn't understand. So, this way. All right, so, yeah. No, you have to keep your feet on. Dude, look, all right, here we go. Like, you gotta start rolling at least. And go. Your feet on the pedal. Go. Yeah. All right. One more time.
Once you have a rigid way of thinking in your head, sometimes you cannot change that, even if you want to. So here's what I did. It was a personal challenge. I stayed out here in this driveway and I practiced about 5 minutes every day. My neighbors made fun of me. I had many wrecks, but after 8 months, this happened. One day I couldn't ride the bike and the next day I could. It was like I could feel some kind of pathway in my brain that was now unlocked. It was really weird though. It's like there's this trail in my brain, but if I wasn't paying close enough attention to it, my brain would easily lose that neural path and jump back onto the old road it was more familiar with. Any small distractions at all, like a cell phone ringing in my pocket, would instantly throw my brain back to the old control algorithm and I would wreck, but at least I could ride it. My son is the closest person to me genetically, and he's been riding a normal bike for 3 years. That's over half his life. I wanted to know how long it would take him to learn how to ride a backwards bike, so I told him if he learned how to ride a backwards bike, he could go with me to Australia and meet a real astronaut. Are you going to give up? Go ahead. This is how it starts. Look at this. This is such a big deal. Get up. You got it. Did you see his brain get it? So in how many weeks have we been doing this? 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, he did something that took me 8 months to do, which demonstrates that a child has more neuroplasticity. Am I even saying that right? Than an adult. It's clear from this experiment that children have a much more plastic brain than adults. That's why the best time to learn a language is when you're a young child.
Okay, so a really interesting video there. And I want to talk about this idea of learn and unlearn and relearn. And so what I think that video does really nicely is it dramatizes in real life what we know from neuroscience. So we know that children have more neuroplasticity, as in their brains are able to learn faster. But we also know that as adults, a lot of the things we learn are actually quite established and quite rigid. And so when we have to suddenly try and unlearn something, it can be really difficult, like, you know, trying to unlearn how to ride a bike because now it's really different. So I just want to have a chat about this. And I think we started to hear some of it from Helen in terms of that feeling of being uncomfortable or needing courage. But what happens when we have to or we need to unlearn? So what happens?
I'm guessing resistance.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resistance. So when we have to unlearn something, and just say it's when we're at work, right? What do we think happens in that? So yes, there's resistance, but what do we think happens actually in practice? So just say you're having a busy day, you've got to get stuff done, got deadlines, deliverables, etc. And there's something that has to be done differently. So we know we kind of have to unlearn, but we're really busy. What happens then?
I'm guessing that deferral.
Yeah, deferral or default back to the old way. And this is where we have this really big gap between intention, you know, so we might say, oh, we need a more collaborative way of working. I'm making this up, right? Like we need a more collaborative way of working, or we want to be more collaborative. But unless we actually focus on how to unlearn old behaviors, it's very hard to relearn the new ones. And when there's resistance or it's difficult, it takes much more cognitive load, we often default back to the old behavior. So there's this gap or this tension, this tension between what the intention is and what the reality is. So so does anyone else have any other thoughts? Like, have you had any experiences of trying to unlearn? Any examples you can think coming up for you, whether it's at work or at home or in life?
I think it can be quite frustrating. And I know myself when I've had to, I call it evolving my thinking, but for example, if you've got beliefs around, like for me, it was in the financial markets and processes that had worked for a long time around how things worked or happened. And then when you have that moment of truth, I call it pulling out the knife, because it's actually a really difficult thing to let go of. And you have to dig deep, and you have to, well, I dig deep and I retreat into trying to better understand. I research. That's how I deal with it. But sometimes if you're in the moment, you don't have that luxury of taking it, because it takes quite an amount of time and, re-understanding.
And effort. Like, I love your saying of pulling out the knife. It is. It's like,
Exactly. I don't want to it hurts when it comes out, doesn't it?
It does hurt. Takes focus and effort. Anyone else want to share anything?
I think you have to be vulnerable and you feel exposed. So you're kind of not in your own safety zone, and that then plays into confidence of actually taking that action on or not. And it's easier, as you said, then to revert because of that vulnerability and that exposure.
Yeah, I love that. And even like if we go back to the bike example, so just kind of thinking about what you were saying, Robin, you're about to fall. You're going to fall. You know, like everyone was there going, oh yeah, I can do that. Conceptually, I get that they've reversed the wheel or welded it the wrong way, so everything's back to front. I get it conceptually, but to actually do it, like, I'm going to fall over. And, you know, he was talking about how he fell over for 8 months, which is a really long time. And I think it's that piece of, you know, we've got training wheels on, or where we don't know how to do it, that is really uncomfortable, and it requires that vulnerability or that openness to be able to say, it's okay that I'm learning. So sorry, that's my little dog in the background who decided to visit. Okay. So what's really interesting is that to relearn, we need to have space. So that's why unlearn needs to happen first. And if it's in the same context, you know, so you're not learning something different, you need to replace a belief. That's a lot harder than just putting in a different belief. So that's why I think the bike analogy is actually really good, because we've all learnt how to ride a bike, probably in our childhood, and suddenly you have to unlearn it when you've got a bike that's completely different, and only then are you able to relearn what's important. So these were just, I felt, really important themes for us to think about. And what I love about the opportunity of the study tour is that we get to just be open and exploring what we're seeing, and through that process be able to suddenly, you know, think about, okay, well, what have I assumed, or what have I taken as truth, or what do I actually believe? So yeah, unlearning means stripping away what we currently know to be true. And it's painful. It's really painful. It's like the fingernails on the chalkboard. And sometimes that discomfort, it's not always, it doesn't always manifest in obvious ways. So sometimes it can be frustration over frustration, like the guy said when he was trying to ride the bike. But sometimes it can manifest more in our subconscious, because our subconscious is where beliefs live. So, you know, and emotions live in our subconscious as well. So that uncomfortable feeling, it may be overt, such as frustration, but it may be something that is just gnawing at us in different ways. So everyone will have different types of emotions that come from the pain, cutting the knife, of unlearning. And then if we think about relearning, it's basically we're starting with new eyes, like we're starting from scratch again. So, you know, it's that wonderful opportunity then to think differently about, okay, and recognize what's going in. I remember, so my background is marketing, and I came up through marketing into senior leadership, and I went to the US in 2003. And I remember loving the fact as a marketer that I could go grocery shopping and not know any of the brands, and actually feel how I was influenced by the shelves, because I didn't know any of the brands on the shelf. And so I was really aware then. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, the shelf position, you know, all of the different things we know drive sales from on shelf. It was really obvious to me how that was working, because it hadn't yet gone into my knowledge of what was normal or what was just a routine. And so we have this awareness when we relearn, we actually have awareness of the process happening. So I just want to share with you 6 points which relate to neuroscience about this. Has anyone done any study in this area? Does anyone have knowledge? Okay. Let me share. So I've got 6 things here, and these I think will come up for all of us as we're on the study tour, and it's good just to be aware of them, because they have an effect on how well we actually utilize the experience of the tour to challenge our beliefs, or to unlearn and relearn, and to think about, well, what do we want to do with this? So the first is be curious and ask lots of questions. So from a neuroscience point, when you ask a question, the whole brain lights up. So I'm sure you guys know, like if you tell someone information, or if you give them a fact, they'll be like, yeah, I get it. But if you ask them to recall it, they'll find it really hard. It's why they say when people make keynotes that they're lucky if they remember 3 things. Someone could have been talking to you for an hour, and then you ask people at the end, what were the 3 points? They'll be like, but you know, they were listening during the whole thing. So information does not necessarily stay in memory. When you ask a question though, it forces you to scan through your whole brain, and your brain looks for connections. So all the different parts of the brain are looking for, how do I pull out the right information to answer that question? And so that's why questions are so powerful, because it helps people not only form their own point of view, but it also forces more connections in the brain. So questions are great. The next one is around examining and challenging beliefs. So there's a very close relationship between what we think, what we feel, and what we do. So has anyone here ever tried to quit smoking, or go on a diet, or has anyone not tried to go on a diet? I'd like to meet this person. Okay, so we've all tried to do something along those lines. You know, maybe it's exercise more. So basically, there's a very close relationship between how we think, how we feel, and what we do. So if we are thinking, say, for example, oh, exercise is too hard, you know, or oh, it's just too much effort, then we'll feel like it's really hard to get out of bed and exercise, and then we probably won't do it. Yeah. So what a lot of different groups try and get you to do is get into a routine, because, you know, when you actually do go and exercise, so just say you got up and you exercised, then you're probably going to feel better, and you're going to think, yeah, that was really worth it. So those things are all linked, and psychologists use this a lot. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's about looking at the relationship between them. If you change one, you can actually change the others as well, and it creates reinforcement. But the thing I want you to think about is, as we start to be exposed to all these different stimulus and perspectives, it'll help us to start to go, well, maybe I have believed something, or I have beliefs that aren't true. And so don't be surprised if, as you are exposed to this stuff, if suddenly you feel differently, and then that's going to create different thoughts and, you know, and different behaviors or different perspectives. So the important piece here is just to recognize they're all related. And as you feel something shifting, think about what belief sits under that. What is the belief that is deep inside that we may be questioning now, whether that's true or not? And you see this happening a lot in the world, right? Like a lot of trends, a lot of what the world then looks at in terms of, you know, what's important to society. How do we, consider the evolution to deeper learning, better knowledge, better outcomes. So obviously, Greed Was Good was the 80s, Gordon Gekko, Wall Street, the movie. And now that's obviously shifting a lot, which is a big part of this study tour, where it's about sustainability in the planet and purpose. It's not just about profit. I just want to stop there. Has anyone ever had a sort of situation like this where they've felt something shift and they've been able to link it back to a belief? I see a few nods. Yeah.
Rowena, hi. I'm loving everything you're sharing. Thank you. It's so generous of you to be doing this with us. Yeah. And I was just thinking, I feel like I have this conversation every day with 3 teenagers in the house, I have to say. It's such a topical, I hadn't realized until you'd shared it how much this conversation goes around our dinner table actually regularly, but how often I've forgotten to actually even just rethink about it and apply it to myself. I'm so busy being the parent to the kids. And then catching yourself in that moment where you think, actually, this so applies to me. Often I think about that as I'm nodding off to sleep, thinking note to self.
Yeah.
Tomorrow. So true. So true. Thank you.
No, absolute pleasure. And it is so true. Like this is what's happening. And it's so powerful when we can be aware of what's happening. And then, like you were saying, Emma, we can intervene, or we can get faster to what is the belief that may be shifting and be more intentional about it. And that's often where there is tension between, say, generations, because the beliefs are different. What we've been exposed to or experience looks very different. And that's what we're challenging each other on, is the beliefs. I have 2 teenagers too, so I totally feel you. Okay, the next one is around multisensory learning. And I'm super excited about going into country and just having the chance to be in 3 different locations, but having so many different sources of stimulation. And we all tend to have a preferred style of learning. Corporate world tends to be very skewed to visual and reading, writing. And that's just because that's how communication primarily happens. But what's really great to think about is how we can learn through the other styles. And the actual study tour has multiple learning styles integrated. And when we put them all together, or even use a style that we're not used to doing, it actually deepens the learning, because it's forcing us to learn differently. So let me know, guys, what do you think? If you had to choose one of these as your dominant, just pop it in the chat box. What would be your preferred learning style? If you had to choose one, what would be your dominant and preferred learning style? Visual. Reading, writing. Yeah, reading, writing. It's the dominant style that's used in corporate or in business, in government, etc. So, we've got an auditory and a kinesthetic. I love that. So auditory's obviously become really popular with podcasting. So it was harder to really do a lot of auditory learning for most people until podcasting became huge. And the fact that so many people like to do it just reinforces the value of that style. And kinesthetic. I love kinesthetic as well. And working with people who are kinesthetic learners. So children are very kinesthetic. So if you've, had kids around you, you'll see how they, you know, little kids love to put things in their mouth, love to grab them, you know, like they're using all their senses, but they're very kinesthetic. It's because their brain hasn't developed as much. So, so we all have access to all of these learning styles. And when we use multiple learning styles, we actually deepen our learning. So we learn not only through our, you know, our brain, so visual and reading, writing, and the world of work is very much left brain oriented. But some of the other learning styles, particularly kinesthetic, tend to be more right brain or creative oriented. So, and they both add different things to the learning. So yeah, think about maybe intentionally, you know, doing some more of the learning style you're not as used to, because that will also deepen your learning, and you may find that different things come out for you. I find, you know, coming, you know, through business, etc., that if I want to learn something different, I try and use a style I'm not used to. So like all of you guys, I'm sure you get a billion presentations and everyone flicks now. No one actually reads it. Everyone flicks, right? 40-page, you know, 40-page documents in my inbox today. Flick, 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 flick. I'm actually not reading it. I'm scanning it and going, yeah, nothing concerning. Nothing I need to action. It looks fine. Okay, so I'm so used to that. I can go on autopilot. If I want to disrupt myself, I'll use kinesthetic. And it's harder, but it's much more, more interesting things come out. It forces me to think differently. So I'll often use Lego. So there's actually a learning technique called Lego Serious Play. Lego for adults really is great. And it's a wonderful way to actually co-create and create ideas and also think about how things are related. So that's an example of, you know, how you can do different types of learning and force yourself out of your comfort zone. Any thoughts on that? Any comments that people want to make? Feel free to come off mute if you want to share anything. No? Okay. Seek new and deep connections. Okay, so how memory and meaning works is through connections. So your brain is looking for, like, what does this mean? And the more connections we can make, the deeper the learning will be and the better it will stay in memory. So when I just talked about, you know, flicking through PowerPoint slides, I'm not really remembering what's in them in detail. But if I do want to think about and create new meaning, then I'll look for, okay, so what does that mean? How does that connect? How does this link back to what I know? And when we're talking about unlearning and relearning, there's usually a piece that is still there, but there's a piece we have to learn that's new. So think about that bike example. He was still riding a bike. He had to learn how to ride the bike where he's like the wheel worked completely differently. For anyone who's, I don't know, like driven a car overseas, say in the US, and you've had to learn how to drive on the other side of the road. So there's parts that you still know, like the pedal, the brake, you know, the steering wheel, etc. They're still there, but there's something that's completely different. And that's usually what happens when we're thinking about what's changing, what's the future. It's very rare that everything is completely new. It's usually an evolution, like there's a part that's the same and a part that's different. And that's where looking for connections and techniques like mind mapping really help. So I use mind maps a lot. And like one of the things I'll be doing as we're going through the study tour is with my handy little journal, see right here, journal, I'll be like writing mind maps. particularly while it's fresh, because, you know, if you don't make the connections in my head anyway, they just disappear. And I'm like, that was such a good idea. Like, what was it? And then I can't remember it, particularly when you're got lots of stimulus around you. So, so think about how you can make connections as you're going through the 6 days, because then when we come to the final day, and I think there's going to be some facilitation around, you know, what does this mean? What are the outcomes? You'll have a lot more of those connections already there to be able to then say, okay, what does this mean? How do we consider that as a group? How do we learn from each other? And how do we define outcomes? So here's my favorite ones. Enjoy restorative sleep, which can be really hard when you're on tour, right? I'm excited about all of the social connections. So, you know, sleep may not always be a priority, but your brain can only transfer information to long-term memory through sleep. It can't keep it there. And that's why they talk about how sleep is actually so important to not only, you know, being able to think in your, you know, high performance mode every day, but also long-term health, because it's the way that the brain processes all the stimulation and then starts to make those connections and file it into long-term memory. So it may not be 8 hours, which is the recommended amount, but like sleep becomes really important. And this leads me to the second point, which relates to this, which is about managing your energy. So I want to be honest, guys, like when I saw the study tour, I was like, this is so exciting. And then I went, 6 days, because I'm actually an extroverted introvert, which means like people will think I'm an extrovert, but I actually need time on my own. And it stresses me out when I'm just around people 24/7. And I find particularly post-COVID that I can find, okay, it's much more exhausting. So I just want to say, manage your energy. I know Tanya and I were talking about how often it'll be day 3 or day 4 when energy levels dip, because your body can't just be high energy all the time, and your brain can't cope with high energy all the time. So depending on whether you're an introvert, somewhere in the middle, or an extrovert, just think about managing your energy. So I'm so excited to meet everyone, but I know that there may be a night or two when I'll be like, I got to check out. I gotta go. So yeah, so think about your energy levels as well, because that's actually really important to maximize the experience for you. Does anyone else find, like with energy, etc., that it can be something they need to manage or think about? You can see Susie nodding.
For me, it's an age thing. Definitely, yeah. I'm glad I share it with you.
Yeah.
The age thing, but the energy level and the introvert extrovert thing.
Yeah.
I'm also an extroverted introvert, so.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, excellent. We'll both be like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So they're the 6 things to keep in mind. And what I just want to do now in the last few minutes, I want us to think about why we're here. Why have we joined? And I just wanted to share, like, this is what was in the invitation pack, so the objectives that were put out, which was reimagining our future. There was some key points around new models for leadership, insight, networking, navigating, and accelerating into a more sustainable, inclusive, and equitable future. So there's a lot of interesting things in the objectives, lots of different components. And I'm sure different parts of that appeal differently to each of us. So I just wanted to share you mine, and then you'll have a chance to think about yours. And the reason why this is helpful is it helps you to frame what your learning intent is and what do you want to actually get out of it. Now, that's not to say you'll only get out of it what you identify now, because there'll be things along the way that come up, but it's a really good way to start and to go into it with the clarity of, why am I here? So anyway, for me, and I usually just say, they're usually about 3 different reasons. So the first one for me was I was just ready for something new. And I haven't done one of these before. But when I read the agenda, I just got goosebumps. And I put a lot of faith in my intuition. So I just went, yeah, going to do it. And then when I got into the detail of it, I'm like, yeah, I'm into new leadership and learning models. I'm really interested in that. So a part of what I do for my work now is in that space. So that's really interesting in terms of what I'm going to not only be exposed to, but thinking and creating new IP around it. And then the fact that I got to hang out with 60 other incredible women, I was like, oh, how good is that? And I have to say, like, it was highly appealing that it was 60 women. You know, like, I feel like the energy is really different. And because, you know, there's so many different ways to connect. And I love the fact that it was across completely different industries as well. So not just people who I tend to be in their circle with. So those for me were the really big pluses. And then, like I said to you before, I was like, oh my gosh, this is for six days. Like, okay, I'm gonna have to manage my energy levels, but you know, it's going to be amazing. So that 6 days says to me, it's going to be really comprehensive. It's going to be really deep. It's going to be plenty of time to get to know each other and, you know, really understand different points of view. And that's what got me really excited. So how this then translated into this why. And like I said before, don't make it complicated, or don't try and overthink it. Just, you know, when you write yours, just let it flow, because it's just for you. It's not for anyone else. It's just for you. Okay, so I'm here to create new possibilities, to make new friends, to be challenged and changed. I wanted to learn by making connections across old and new, by collaborating and co-creating, so we have equitable perspectives and better ways forward. Like, I've been spending a lot of time in my work thinking about equity versus equal and how that manifests in the workplace and how we can write some of that and better co-create. So I'm really interested in all of that. I told you I was a bit nerdy. Okay. To achieve this, I will challenge myself through open exploration, deeply listen and engage with ideas and discussion, and manage my energy to maximize my contribution. So yeah, so that's my Women's Leadership Study Tool Why. And I'm going to be using this to help me think about what I want to get out of it, but also be open to what comes up anyway while I'm in it. So what I thought we could do now is just take 5 minutes. We can all turn our cameras off for 5 minutes. I know a few of you have to drop off. And we'll send out this slide, but just take 5 minutes now and think about what's yours. Doesn't have to be complicated. It's just for you. But it's a really good way to get clear on what you want to be learning as you go into the study tour. So it's 3:48. I'm going to turn my camera off and I'll stay off for 5 minutes. You feel free to turn yours off as well. And then when I come back, if you're still here, please come back. Okay, and I'll see you in 5 minutes. Zoom record. This is the learning design that I did for me for the study tour. And as you can see here, we've got at the top, we've got perspective. And so we've got all those inputs from the agenda and also all the inputs that are going to come from our different viewpoints and the people we're hearing from. So that's going to be a huge amount of stimulation for shifting perspective. But what I want you to think about is how do you unlearn and relearn? And this happens in some of the bottom areas. So the next level down is around connection. And so this connection is going to come through what we're experiencing. So through all of our senses, and then also from each other, you know, so those side conversations and, you know, just what did we see? What did we feel? What did we learn? What's bubbling up? What's making us feel uncomfortable? So really, there'll be a lot of interesting stuff in that space. And then finally, it's the new knowing that can emerge. And this may be through ideas, but it will also probably come through in beliefs. Now, a lot of the time we talk about ideas, but actually beliefs are really important because when beliefs shift, then everything shifts. So often conversation is around the ideas, but it will be really powerful if as a group we peel that back to, okay, well, what's changing in those beliefs? So it's getting down to the core. And when that shifts, then everything can shift around that, all the ideas, different ideas. So whenever I'm teaching learning for people and how to shift a culture or shift behaviors or shift a way of working, I always try and get it down to the belief level because that's the fundamental shift, and then everything can be rebuilt off that. So that's the learning design. And just down the bottom, I have this, you know, unlearn and relearn. And often we'll start off subconsciously with, I know, like, this is what I know. Because we've all got lots of experience and like it's a kick-ass group of women, right? So like there's going to be lots of knowledge in the group. But then as we start to see different perspectives and start to challenge that, then mindsets will shift into, I know I don't know, but I'm not sure yet what I am going to replace that with. And so that's where you reach this beautiful culmination point, which is I know for now. And that's the best place for learning, because once people are able to identify and stay in that place of I know for now, that's when anything can happen. And we talk about collaboration and co-creation. If I go back to the objectives of the Women's Leadership Study Tour, when people live in I know for now, that's where things can move forward for society. Anyway, that's the overview. Like I said, I'm definitely a nerd. So for a few minutes on the different days, we're going to be doing some stand-ups. So there'll be a chance to actually look at some of these different techniques I've talked about today. So whether it's about how we're curating our connection or curating sensory stimulus and our energy, or curating the insights and ideas. So remember the mind maps that are coming into our heads. And on day 6, there'll be the focus on new knowing. So at the end, it's like, what does this mean? What are we going to do with it? And then for those of you who are interested, there's a session that I'll run afterwards, 3 weeks post, reflection and action plans. So it takes time for everything to go and filter from the 6 days of intense stimulation, hence why it's 3 weeks post. So most people can't, I know I can't, I definitely can't, but most people find that they can't just take in and make sense of all of that stimulation that they've seen, heard, felt. So with a little bit of a gap, it gives that chance for it to become clear. So that's all for me. Any questions? Any comments? Any thoughts? Really looking forward to meeting you guys all. I really can't wait. It'll be fantastic just to hang out for 6 days on this beautiful learning journey. So thanks so much for coming, and I'll see you in Uluru.
Thank you, Rowena.
Thank you, Rowena.
Thanks very much.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
See you all then.
Thank you. It's not leaving.
That's okay.